Good morning. I'm Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, and it's my honor to welcome you to the 8th Annual International Conference on Cyber Engagement. For those of you who are returning to the ICCE, welcome back. For those of you joining for the first time, get ready. This is going to be a day full of insights and dynamic conversation that will shape this critical domain. I've always found at gatherings like this, the ideas and insights you go away with are crucial, but sometimes the enlarged and enhanced networks, the friends that you make, are even more lasting. At the Atlantic Council, our job for nearly 60 years now has been to promote constructive leadership and engagement in the world alongside friends and allies by providing an essential forum for navigating dramatic economic and geopolitical change, and in this case, those defining the 21st century. Through the papers we write, the ideas we generate, the communities we build, and the conferences we hold, the Council aims to shape policy choices and wherever possible, propose actionable solutions and strategies to shape a more secure world. We're results-oriented, we're dynamic, we want to make things happen, so help us do that today. Simply put, we work together with allies and partners to secure the future and to shape the future. This mission is epitomized by the Council's work in cyberspace, and especially through this gathering. Let me put it in context. In the last couple of years, we've had a series of strategic retreats at the board level and at the staff leadership level, and we've identified 5 megatrends that we think make this an inflection point in history, maybe as important as 1919, 1945, 1989. Some would even go back to 1815 in the Congress of Vienna. Those 5 trends, and this is the context because I think the cyber questions reach into each one of these. The first is we've entered a new era of major power competition. Some would say it's already major power conflict, particularly in the cyberspace. We're in an era of fraying democracies and surging autocracies. We're in an era where after 70 years of U.S. leadership, the United States is the glue that held together the liberal international order. There's a question about what the future U.S. role in the world will be. That's number 3. And then number 4, there's a question about the global system itself that was established in no small part by many of the founders of the Atlantic Council, Dean Acheson, Henry Cabot Lodge, Lucius Clay, Mary Pillsbury Lord, and so on. And then finally, we're in an era of disruptive technology. Some are calling it the fourth industrial revolution, that will have impact on all 4 of the other trends, and on the way we live our lives, run our businesses, and interact as governments. It will have an impact on geopolitics as well. We don't see any of these forces, any of these trends as reason for despair. Rather, we see it as a call to action, as a reason to renew our activities with friends and allies to shape this new era. So in that context, each of us are here today to hear from top thought leaders in the cyber domain, leaders from government, industry, the nonprofit sector, and academia from across the globe. We're eager to hear how we can collaborate, not just compete, in cyberspace with the goal of a more secure and stable cyberspace for all. To that end, the keynotes and panel conversations we have assembled for you today are second to none and international in scope. But before diving into the substance, let me just make a couple of introductions and tip my hat to a few individuals. First of all, Dr. Catherine Lautriante, founder of this conference, and Brent Scowcroft, scholar at the Atlantic Council, has organized ICCE since 2011. This year, it is hosted for the first time by the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, in partnership with Denton's, PKO Bank Polski, and Texas A&M University. We have other partners as well, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Over the years, ICCE has grown significantly in size and significance, This is not surprising, as the challenges we face in cyberspace have only grown since the establishment of this important convening. But I think we also have to look at cyberspace challenges not entirely as solely cyber challenges. More and more, cyber challenges are embedded in a host of other aspects and therefore are becoming more hybrid challenges more often than not. As we've seen, cyber issues transcend nations and disciplines, demanding international collaboration. The goal of ICCE is to establish an ongoing forum where diverse experts and practitioners can establish a foundation for cooperation and international engagement to address the complex and fluid cybersecurity issues we know all too well, and their interaction with issues that go way, way outside the cyber domain. No matter the country it calls home, digital technology touches every person across the world, and more it touches every aspect of their lives. International collaboration in cyberspace becomes more crucial each day to ensure a safe, secure, stable, and prosperous cyberspace for the citizens of the world. Significant challenges lie between us and that goal. There is no shortage of cyber issues to deal with. From the tensions inherent to the geopolitics of 5G, which we're all reading so much about right now, to the risks of deploying Internet of Things devices across our growing smart cities, to the data and privacy issues that have to do with artificial intelligence, to political disinformation enabled by social media, vulnerable critical infrastructure, precarious software supply chains, the list goes on. Cyber criminals hail from all nations, and they know no borders. Nation-states utilize cyber to undermine one another and destabilize a landscape that might otherwise be safe and secure. The Marriott Hotels data breach of December 2018 and the ASUS computer supply chain attack just last month remind us of the costs of criminal and nation-state cyber attacks when we don't have international collaboration and norms. And that's part of the reason we've called our cyber activities at the Atlantic Council the Cyber Statecraft Initiative, to reach those norms and collaboration. Nations feel their sovereignty is threatened, companies suffer damages to revenue and reputation, everyday people lose control of personal information and identities. And such attacks will continue to grow unless we act, and unless defense becomes as strong or stronger than offense. At the Atlantic Council, we recognize these challenges and we don't shy away from them. Rather, we take a results-oriented approach by engaging in the everyday work that shapes policy and steers us in the right direction. We are committed to our mission of promoting constructive U.S. engagement alongside friends and allies to secure the future of cyberspace. Our goal for today is to have more than just discussions. We want to move the needle on issues, so help us do that. Help us identify the issues and help us think about how we actually move the needle. I'm optimistic about the ideas and understandings we can forge together today, which we can then turn into the work we do at the Atlantic Council, and you can turn into the work that you do in your businesses and in your office places and in civil society. This conference would not be possible without the work of Catherine and several important partners. As I mentioned earlier, the support of our co-hosting partners, Denton's PKO Bank Polski and Texas A&M University, were essential in organizing this event for you all today. We're also doing quite a bit of excellent work with PKO Bank Polski in Poland, where they're a true leader in this field. I also want to thank our diamond partners, DXC Technology, the Hewlett Foundation, and Tenable. We are also excited to have the Cypher Brief as our media partner for this event. And thank you to all of our platinum, gold, silver, and bronze partners and more. And you see them all listed in the program that you have in front of you. Your support makes this conference and its important discussions on collaboration in cyberspace possible, and will make it possible for us to go on to the 9th annual and the 10th annual as well. And then finally, thank you to our staff, interns, and volunteers who are running this event. And also, thanks to you who have chosen to join us today. Your interest in finding areas for international collaboration and cyber engagement is encouraging. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Catherine Lotriante founder of the International Conference on Cyber Engagement, and new to the Atlantic Council, or relatively new to the Atlantic Council. Catherine, welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Fred, thank you for the introduction and the welcome. As Fred mentioned, I started this conference out of a conviction that a true multidisciplinary approach and international engagement were and are the only way that the cyber community can begin to address the many complex challenges stemming from our interconnectivity. This year, as Fred mentioned, will be the 8th annual year that this conference has taken place. That is exactly why today we've convened again, and this time we've brought more experts and stakeholders than in previous years even. We're going to have a series of conversations today among us and others that will join us throughout the day on all aspects of cyberspace: the legal, the military, the governmental, the commercial, and the societal. Today, we're going to explore some of the greatest strategic questions in cyberspace. The panels that we'll hear from are very diverse, and they'll cover topics such as the different regional perspectives on cyber, norms in cyber diplomacy, military and intelligence actions in cyberspace, the software supply chain issues. These issues will truly set the tone for our conference, bringing together a diverse range of speakers and perspectives from just about every continent in the world. But we will also address in depth some of the strategic issues surrounding today's more important emerging technologies, such as 5G, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, and some of the challenges of the key issues such as disinformation and privacy. It's going to be a busy day today. I do encourage you all to take breaks at various times, even if it's not built into the agenda. I'm happy to say that throughout the day we have over 900 people that have registered and they'll be joining us. And most important to me, the reason why I began this conference, today we have over 61 countries that will be with us, many as speakers, but also in attendance. I hope that we can all kind of gain knowledge from each other, find some time during the day to talk over lunch or step out of the conference and talk to each other. We also have over 100 students registered, and this means also a lot to me. As a professor and someone who began this conference at Georgetown, I feel it's critically important that we involve some of the younger people that will be our leaders in the future in some of these discussions that often only take place in between the most senior experts and policymakers. But here today, we'll have many, many students from many universities engaging in these topics, and I'm really excited about that. But now, I want to welcome to the stage our first keynote speaker of the day, Ms. Amy Hess, the Executive Assistant Director of the Criminal, Cyber, Response, and Services Branch of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigations. EAD Hess oversees all FBI criminal and cyber investigations worldwide. She oversees international operations, critical incident response, and victim assistance as well. She began her career as a special agent with the FBI in January of 1991, and since then has served in the Kansas City, Louisville, Phoenix, and Memphis field offices, as well as in Afghanistan. In 2014, she was promoted to the position of Executive Assistant Director over the FBI's Science and Technology Branch. And in 2016, she was appointed as the Special Agent in charge of the Louisville Field Office with responsibility for all FBI personnel and operations in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We're thrilled to have her here today as our first keynote speaker of the day. So without further ado, please welcome EAD Hess to the stage.
Good morning. Thank you, Catherine, for the invitation to be here today, and thanks to all of you for the opportunity to speak with you here for a few minutes this morning. As noted, my name is Amy Hess, and I am one of 6 executive assistant directors for the FBI, and specifically my portfolio includes, as noted, all of our criminal investigations, our cyber operations, our international operations worldwide in more than 80 overseas field offices, and our response to crisis events or crisis response, and our victim services. However, of all of those things, even though I try really hard to split my time equitably across that portfolio, one thing in particular, as you are all too well aware, occupies the most of it, and that is our response to cyber attacks. They have become more and more prevalent in every investigation and everything we do, and we have seen the threat evolving and growing every day. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about how the FBI is thinking about those threats and some of the things I think we can do together globally to fight them. Now, while the threat may be constantly evolving, the FBI's approach to the threat is, I think, consistent with our experience, our authorities, and our history. In fact, the FBI was created in 1908 in response to changing new technology at the time, the automobile. This new technology showed great promise and the allure of great opportunities for both law-abiding citizens and for criminals. The ability of criminals to easily travel across state lines drove the demand for a federal law enforcement agency with the ability to pursue bad actors regardless of geographic boundaries. Investigating crime and national security incidents and assisting victims is therefore not new to us. We've used our field-centric model to bring down dangerous criminal enterprises, foil terrorist plots, and disrupt rings of foreign spies for more than 110 years. And in our cyber efforts, we've applied the same investigative expertise. We've called out nation-state actors for hacking into U.S. businesses and stealing intellectual property. We've taken down global botnets. We've unmasked cyber criminals who thought they could remain anonymous. We've successfully extradited those who hack for their countries or to line their own pockets, or for both. And I think our unique experience, authorities, and responsibilities puts the FBI at the center of our government's efforts to combat cyber threats. Now, I know this audience is intimately familiar with cyber threats that we face, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but what I would like to talk about is some of the trends we're seeing. For starters, we've seen the emergence of a hybrid threat, as we call it, or nation-state actors who are hiring criminals to achieve their national security objectives, using ransomware and other hackers' tools to do so. In December of last year, the Department of Justice indicted 2 Chinese nationals affiliated with a hacking group operating in China. The group, APT-10, was associated with the Chinese government's Ministry of State Security, or MSS. The members of this group conducted major computer intrusion campaigns targeting U.S. government agencies and private companies, both in the U.S. and around the world, stealing intellectual property and confidential business information. The hackers' work crossed over traditional criminal and national security lines to achieve China's intelligence mission. Now, China's goal is simple: to replace the U.S. as the world's leading superpower. And they did and will continue to break societal laws and norms to get there. In fact, we've seen an increasing level of sophistication in their techniques, tactics, and procedures. But going toe-to-toe with China in terms of the cyber threat is Russia. We're seeing similar hybrid threats coming from there as well, but with a slightly different objective. Just this past October, the Department of Justice indicted 7 officers from Russia's main intelligence directorate, or GRU, for computer hacking, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering. These individuals conducted the hacking to retaliate against world anti-doping officials who publicly exposed the Russian government's sponsorship of doping by Russian athletes. The hacks were in line with other activity we've seen from Russia and were part of a disinformation campaign to undermine the regulatory organizations and spread false narratives about other athletes and organizations. These activities moved well beyond acceptable government intelligence operations and broke traditional norms and the law by using cyber resources in the way that they did. And in November of last year, the FBI and Department of Justice indicted 2 Iranian national criminal actors for deploying ransomware that crippled hospitals, local governments, and other public institutions to the tune of $30 million in losses to the U.S. These criminals infected data networks with what was called SamSam ransomware in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. That ransomware infected over 230 victim networks worldwide. As you can see, in indicting foreign nationals from China, Russia, and Iran, we're sending a message that we will do whatever is in our power to hold these people accountable, even when those indicted are not immediately accessible to answer the charges. We will work to expose them and to limit their future criminal activity. Now, in many cases, the U.S. government issues Interpol red notices for cyber criminals' arrest and extradition to the United States. That limits their ability to travel. And if they do attempt to travel, we are more likely to catch them and to bring them to justice. For example, in February of 2018, the alleged creator of the Keynotes botnet, a Russian national named Peter Levashov, was extradited from Spain. And in March of last year, Yevgeny Nikulin of Moscow made his initial appearance in U.S. federal court following his extradition from the Czech Republic to face allegations that he illegally accessed computers belonging to LinkedIn, to Dropbox, and FormSpring. Now, this seems to happen regularly. The U.S. has bilateral extradition treaties with over 100 countries, and we also, in coordination with our international partners, work to dismantle the criminal infrastructure that is used to conduct cybercrime. Our foreign partners are key to those efforts. You may recall in July of 2017, the Alphabet Hansa market takedowns were one of the most sophisticated and coordinated efforts to date on the part of law enforcement across the globe. U.S. law enforcement worked with foreign partners to shut down the Alphabet darknet market, causing criminal users and vendors to flock to the Hansa market. And concurrently, Dutch law enforcement worked to shut down the Hansa market once those individuals moved to that site. In addition to those measures, attribution allows the United States government to take coordinated action to impose costs on those who violate our laws and threaten our national security. If we're able to attribute malicious cyber activity to a nation state, it enables policymakers to consider using all tools available to impose those costs. And that includes sanctions, sanctions through the U.S. Treasury, the Commerce Department's Entity List designation, and U.S. Trade Representative action. So while we can't always apprehend subjects, or at least quickly or easily, we will keep at it and we will keep disrupting their lives and activity. We have a long memory and an important responsibility to the victims. That brings me to a really important point, and it's the reason why I continually speak to groups like this audience here today. It's because we can't lose sight of the fact that the victims of malicious cyber activity are not only governments and companies, but people. It could very well be you, your company, your agency, your city, your country who are the victims of an attack. And in each of those examples, people are affected. The FBI has a long history and physical presence throughout the country and the world working with victims. So I want to ensure you know how the FBI can support you, your organization, your agency, your company, if you're ever in the unfortunate position of being the victim. Of course, for starters, we always encourage companies to plan ahead for cybersecurity incidents. Every company should have an incident response plan ready and practiced. Companies should develop a relationship with the FBI and local law enforcement prior to an incident. That provides individuals with a dedicated FBI point of contact who they can call in the event of an emergency. Now, we realize companies all have concerns about competitive advantage in the marketplace, and the loss of investor confidence or public perception can be extremely damaging to your reputation and bottom line. We also realize after a company has been the victim of a cyber attack, they don't want to be victimized a second time by the perceived burden of an investigation. We understand that the FBI is committed to minimizing this disruption to the company and your employees, and we want to do anything possible to protect your privacy. We'll work with attorneys, general counsel, and others to address any concerns a company may have. And in using lessons learned from previous investigations, we've developed tools to quickly identify and address cyber situations. As we've seen in many instances, an intrusion that may seem insignificant or small, after further analysis, it can spiral into a larger attack. Our assistance starts with notification, but it evolves into a relationship of confidence and trust that allows us to work more collaboratively and effectively with victims. We don't want our first interaction to be after an attack has occurred. That's not the time that we need to be getting to know each other and establishing that trust. Even if you're never the victim or have not been to date, there are so many things we can mutually gain from each other. The FBI, through our field offices, routinely provides classified briefings to our private sector partners to warn them of risks and provide guidance for mitigating threats. And in those briefings, we discuss ongoing malicious cyber activity that you and others, our partners, are seeing, which broadens our knowledge of specific threats and helps better define gaps in our knowledge. We don't have a monopoly on cyber threat intelligence. We must all work together to develop information sharing relationships to successfully understand and combat today's threat. Just think about the expertise and the authorities here in this room alone. Together, we have the ability to more fully understand, combat, and preempt the cyber threat. For those of you who reside or work domestically, the FBI has 56 field offices and 356 satellite offices throughout the United States. And in many of those locations, we have cyber task forces with members from different federal agencies, state and local entities as well. We also have cyber action teams, response teams that we deploy to provide forensic services and expertise on how to address cyber incidents that occur on company networks. But our people are perhaps our most important cyber tool. I would encourage you to please get to know them. I encourage you to reach out to your local field office and establish the relationship and information sharing now. And for those of you who are visiting from abroad, we have a network of FBI cyber attachés working out of our embassies overseas. They work directly with our foreign counterparts in the host country, and we're developing and strengthening those relationships every day. We've even embedded cyber agents with our international counterparts in strategic locations to help us build trust with key partners around the globe. Because as we all know, cyber is a global issue. And of course, anyone can report a cyber incident to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center at IC3.gov. In fact, as just reported yesterday, over $2.7 billion in losses were reported to the IC3 in 2018. And our recovery asset team was able to assist using the financial fraud kill chain to recapture $192 million. To learn more about IC3 and its efforts, I'd highly encourage you to visit our website at fbi.gov and see the top story today. In closing, the FBI, I think, has some exciting new tech and cyber-focused projects and facilities on the horizon. We are increasingly focused on hiring, retaining, and training our workforce of the future. Our focus for the future is finding new ways to work together and take full advantage of intelligence and technology that's available to us to combat this threat. We've got to be focused on sharing the right amount of information at the right time to enable all of us to use our capabilities and our authorities to prevent crime and defend our nation. I look forward to being a part of that conversation with all of you, and thank you for your time today.
Now I'd like to welcome our second keynote speaker of the morning, who in the spirit of the International Conference on Cyber Engagement is also our first international speaker of the day, Mr. David Koh from Singapore. Mr. Koh has an extensive portfolio, serving concurrently as the Commissioner of Cybersecurity, Chief Executive of the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, and the Deputy Secretary, Special Projects, and Defense Cyber Chief of the Ministry of Defense. As a Commissioner, Mr. Koh has the legal authority to investigate cyber threats and incidents, to ensure that essential services are not disrupted in the event of a cyber attack. Concurrently, as Chief Executive of the Cybersecurity Agency, he leads Singapore's efforts to provide dedicated and centralized oversight of national cybersecurity functions. And as the Deputy Secretary for Special Projects and Defense Cyber Chief of the Ministry of Defense, he is responsible for leading and coordinating cyber defense policy, capability development, and the operations for Singapore's defense cluster. Please welcome Mr. David Koh to the stage.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, my bio goes on for a bit. I have a couple of jobs, but sadly, only one salary. Very good morning. It's an honor indeed to be here today at the 8th International Conference on Cyber Engagement. I'd first like to thank the Atlantic Council for inviting me to deliver this keynote address. I know the Council has great hopes because we are starting early in the morning. As for myself, Singapore is 12 hours time difference away, so please forgive me if I nod off halfway. I'm glad to see many familiar faces and this large turnout at today's conference. This reflects the increasing importance that countries are placing on cybersecurity and the related issues, be it cyber norms of behavior, data security, election security, artificial intelligence, or 5G. The list goes on. Many of these issues will be discussed in today's sessions, and I think we'll gain valuable new perspectives from the experts who will be speaking today. My team reminded me that last year, at approximately this time, I was also in Washington, D.C., delivering an address at the National Press Club. At the time of that address, Singapore had just attained the first position in the United Nations ITU Global Cybersecurity Index. Yep, we got first. This year, however, Singapore was ranked 6th globally. The UK is now on top position, with the US a very close second. But as the Singapore example shows, after topping the rankings, the only way next is down. So I understand the mixed feelings of our British colleagues who are here with us today. Just wanted to share with you our own experience. I bring up the ITU rankings to make the point that the Global Cybersecurity Index does not rank countries by the strength of their cyber defenses, or how strong their walls or how impregnable their cyber walls or defenses are. The index is, in fact, a measure of the commitment of ITU member states to cybersecurity. Singapore has consistently fared well globally because we are indeed deeply committed to strengthen the cybersecurity of our systems and networks. In fact, I will go further to say that in some respects, cybersecurity is an existential threat for Singapore. Today, I'd like to share with you some thoughts on why cybersecurity matters to Singapore and how we're tackling the cyber challenge through our multi-pronged national cybersecurity strategy. Singapore sees the world through a lens that is shaped by our geographic, demographic, and economic context. We are a small nation-state in Southeast Asia, a rapidly developing region of over 630 million people. Our population is about 5.9 million. It's similar to that of the Washington metropolitan area. And we're also one of the world's most connected cities. About 93% of Singaporeans use the internet every day, and in fact, there are about 2 cell phones for every Singaporean. In a typical Singaporean audience, they'll be whipping out their cell phones now to confirm that the population of Singapore and Washington metropolitan area is indeed just under 6 million. The pace and scale of Singapore's digitalization push will only become more intense under our Smart Nation initiative, which sets out a vision to harness digital and smart technologies to build a future Singapore. Our National Digital Identity, NDI system, and our push for simplifying and integrating electronic payments are geared towards allowing citizens and businesses to transact in a seamless, convenient, and secure manner. These and other Smart Nation initiatives will enhance the competitiveness and productivity of our economy. But the more digitalized and connected we become, the more important it is to secure our systems, and more work for us, cybersecurity wonks. We see cybersecurity as a key enabler for our Smart Nation drive, not as an impediment. In fact, we should look at cybersecurity like the brakes on a car. We can only drive fast if we have good brakes. Without good brakes, how fast would we dare to go? The parallel would be that without good cybersecurity, how fast would we dare to go towards our Smart Nation and digitalization goals? Ultimately, cybersecurity fosters trust in the technologies that we use today. This trust is the invisible glue that holds our collective digital ambitions together. If we believe that our future prosperity and security will be dependent on the digital world, then we must reach the conclusion that cybersecurity is an existential issue that undergirds and enables our future way of life. Globally, this trust has increasingly become under siege from the many data breaches and cyber incidents reported in the past year. Singapore has not been spared. In the middle of last year, Singapore suffered from the most serious data breach in our history. The personal particulars of about 1.5 million patients, but thankfully not their medical records, was illegally accessed and copied. This was the work of a sophisticated, advanced persistent threat actor. While the financial costs of cyber attacks are already high, indirect costs, such as the loss of trust from the public, are likely to be even higher. We cannot be a successful Smart Nation that is trusted and resilient if our systems are open and vulnerable. So why does Singapore's cybersecurity matter to you? I offer you two reasons. First, Singapore is a gateway to Southeast Asia and the larger Asia-Pacific region. We are a major banking, aviation, and maritime hub, and a significant proportion of the world's capital, air traffic, and freight flows through our borders. Cyber attacks impacting such supranational information infrastructure will spill over to systems well beyond our shores. The tremors of a cyber attack, for example, on Singapore's financial sector will be immediately felt in New York and London. Second, as a small but highly connected nation-state, we offer a testbed for innovative solutions. We do not claim to have the model answer to navigating the Wild West of cyberspace, but the solutions that we have adopted are what we have deemed to suit our priorities, capabilities, and operating contexts. Sharing our experience can be a basis for further discussions with all of you on how we, as an international community, can combat cyber threats together. This sets the context of the formation of my organization, the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, CSA. CSA was formed on the 1st of April 2015 under the Prime Minister's office. The government recognized the pressing need for dedicated and centralized oversight of Singapore's cybersecurity functions. These are encapsulated in the 4 mutually reinforcing pillars of our cybersecurity strategy. It was launched in 2016 by our Prime Minister. Let me briefly take you through some of the key initiatives. First, building a resilient infrastructure and securing our critical information infrastructure, CIIs. CSA plays the role of regulator and partner to ensure that our CII sectors have the capabilities and measures in place to protect against, detect, and respond, as well as recover from cyber threats in a prompt and expedient manner. We have developed a multi-tier national cybersecurity response plan, and we conduct regular cross-sector exercises. For instance, we conduct what we call Exercise Cyberstar, a whole-of-government, or indeed a whole-of-nation cyber exercise that puts Singapore's collective cyber incident management and emergency response plans to the test. We'll be running the 3rd iteration of the exercise later this year. Last year, we also passed and implemented the Cybersecurity Act. The Act provides a legal framework for the oversight and maintenance of national cybersecurity in Singapore, with an emphasis on proactive protection of CIIs against cyber attacks. The Act places legal obligations on the owners of CIIs to put in place mandatory cybersecurity measures in their systems, conduct regular risk assessments and audits on their CIIs, and participate in cybersecurity exercises conducted by CSA, just to name a few. The Act also mandates the reporting of all cyber incidents to CSA and authorizes CSA to respond to and investigate cybersecurity incidents. Secondly, we go beyond our CII sectors to engage businesses and individuals to develop a safe and secure cyberspace. In cyber, we are only as strong as the weakest link. It is important for the public and businesses to be more diligent about protecting their digital lives, their assets, and their data, and to improve our collective security in cyberspace. As seen from the spate of large-scale global data breaches over the past year, including things like Marriott, Facebook, and British Airways, businesses and individuals are often the victims of such indiscriminate attacks. To improve everyday cyber hygiene and savviness, we have undertaken outreach and awareness campaigns to target different segments of the population. For example, we have worked with the schools and trade associations to incorporate elements of cybersecurity and cyber wellness into accessible resources for students and small businesses. Ultimately, while governments will do what we can to provide the public goods and infrastructure towards the creation of a safe and secure cyberspace, we also want to inculcate a sense of collective responsibility in cybersecurity, where everyone, businesses as well as individuals, has an important role to play. Third, building a vibrant cybersecurity ecosystem. Cybersecurity is not just doom and gloom. We have identified cybersecurity as a growth sector for Singapore and a pillar of our digital economy. It opens up jobs and opportunities for our people. To this end, we've attracted a critical mass of the world's top cybersecurity companies to establish a presence in Singapore and also actively help to grow local companies and expertise in the field. Last year, we set up Singapore's first cybersecurity startup hub to help promising startups develop their business ideas, scale, and grow international. We also recognize that manpower is our best resource, but it's also a potential bottleneck in this industry. We have launched several initiatives to deepen our cybersecurity capabilities and to promote growth and career development of professionals. As many of you know, Singapore has a conscript army. The Defence Ministry recently implemented a dedicated vocation for cyber defence, where selected conscripts are trained in cybersecurity to secure and protect military systems and networks. This will give them a head start in cyber skills and experience, which they may tap on in the future and hopefully become professionals in the cybersecurity careers. Our fourth and last pillar emphasizes strengthening our international partnerships. Cybersecurity is a team sport, but one in which we face borderless and asymmetric threats. Combating these threats requires international collaboration to achieve collective action and mutual cooperation. As a small connected city-state, Singapore is committed to the rules-based international order, all the more so for cyberspace. I'd like to spend some time talking about Singapore's view of a rules-based cyberspace based on applicable international law and the adoption of voluntary operational norms, and why this is critical for us and how we, all of us, can hopefully get there. Singapore is firmly committed to the establishment of a rules-based international order in cyberspace. Cyberspace should not be any different from the physical domains. For example, in the maritime domain, there are rules that govern how states should behave, such as through the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. And similarly, in the aviation domain, we abide by the rules set by the International Civil Aviation Organization. These rules underpin our modern economies and our security. Rules should therefore also apply to the cyber domain. A rules-based order is particularly critical for a small state like Singapore. Why? Because the alternative is a world order where might makes right, where rules and norms are routinely flouted, and where there is considerable uncertainty about the sanctity of international agreements and laws. We are sharply cognizant that a world where might makes right spells disaster for us and other small nations, and perhaps even middle powers. We have a saying in Asia, when the elephants fight, the ants get trampled. A small state like Singapore is like an ant in a jungle full of elephants, and we must do what we can to better secure ourselves, especially when the elephants fight. A rules-based international order is necessary for small states to control our own destiny, free from external interference, to safeguard our national security and indeed the collective security of all states, and to prosper economically and deliver a high quality of life for our citizens. Therefore, the necessity and logic of developing rules or norms of behavior in cyberspace is irrefutable. We need to develop such rules or norms expeditiously, reach an agreement for all states to abide by them, and fully adopt and implement them. The question is how? How we can get there. Since 2004, the United Nations has convened 6 working groups, the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts, to move this discussion forward and to propose norms of behavior that states are encouraged to adopt. Some of these circles have said that it is challenging for states to agree on consensual positions at the UN, and perhaps the UN is not working the way it should be. But Singapore's view is that the United Nations remains the best place to broker an agreement where all states on the rules of the game in cyberspace. It is the only universal, inclusive, and multilateral forum, and states have always turned to the UN to develop the rules governing the global commons, of which cyberspace is part of. Only at the UN can all states, big or small, have an equal voice in creating the outcomes we want through a deliberate and consultative process. Later this year, the UN will be convening the 2019 UNGGE and the first ever open-ended working group. Singapore looks forward to participating actively in both and working with many of you in the coming months and years to make progress in the UN deliberations. But that said, developing practical and implementable rules is and of itself not enough. Efforts to drive international trust and cooperation in cyber should take place across multiple complementary fronts. To this end, Singapore leans forward through a regional and international platforms to advance the important conversation on cyber norms. And we do this in 3 ways. First, we promote dialogue to focus the attention of the international community on key cyber issues. Since 2016, we organize annually the Singapore International Cyber Week that brings together stakeholders, including policymakers and industry experts, to forge partnerships and engage in dialogue on salient cybersecurity issues. Last year, more than 8,000 people from more than 50 countries attended our Cyber Week. One anchor event is the International Cyber Leaders Symposium, which holds robust panel discussions among cyber thought leaders on the challenges of forging a trusted and resilient cyberspace. Second, we work closely with our neighbors in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, to develop and implement regional cyber norms that are congruent with the 2015 UNGGE norms. For example, we host the ASEAN Ministerial Conference on Cybersecurity in conjunction with our Cyber Week, and our last meeting in September 2018, the ASEAN ministers and senior officials responsible for ICT and cybersecurity agreed to subscribe in principle to all 11 voluntary non-binding norms recommended in the 2015 GGE. This is a huge step forward for the region. Singapore will continue to work with ASEAN towards the adoption of cyber norms. Lastly, we catalyze practical cooperation by facilitating regional cyber capacity building efforts and confidence building measures. Singapore's efforts on this front include cert-to-cert information sharing, memoranda of understanding with international partners, and various initiatives sponsored through our ASEAN Cyber Capacity Program. This seeks to build technical, policy, and strategy building capabilities within our ASEAN member states. We are also committed to launch the ASEAN-Singapore Cybersecurity Center of Excellence this October. The Center of Excellence will provide cybersecurity capacity building in 3 broad areas: strengthening the state's research capabilities and cyber strategy development and legislation and norms, building up incident response capabilities and information sharing among CERTs, and lastly, to provide practical experience through virtual cyber range exercises. So in conclusion, from Singapore's perspective, a resilient and secure cyberspace depends on the successful execution of a holistic cybersecurity strategy. Singapore is deeply committed to cybersecurity. but we are not resting on our laurels. Cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated by the day, and we cannot afford to let down our guard, given the existential nature of cybersecurity to Singapore. We are competing at the global level in cybersecurity. This is not a race that we can win alone. The threats are coming from all over the world. It compels us to work closely with our regional and international partners. Moving forward, it is important not just to build defenses for the cyber threats of today, but also to build the infrastructure, capabilities, and friendships that will enable us to, as an international community, to tackle the cyber threats of tomorrow. To paraphrase my good friend, General Keith Alexander, we should build a network defense where we can use a network, our network of partners, to defend our cyber network. I hope that my sharing on Singapore's approach to cybersecurity has provided some food for thought, and I look forward to exchanging views with you and other distinguished participants throughout the day. Thank you. The organizers have asked me if I'm prepared to take a couple of questions. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Please. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Koch. Patrick Pavlak from the EU Institute for Security Studies in Paris. I would like to seek your clarification on the point you made about the need for rule-based international order on the basis of the existing international law, but then you mentioned as an example the UNCLOS Convention. This is one of the main arguments that China would use when justifying the need for the new international treaty. So would you mind clarifying how you see the two combined? Thank you.
Right. I think that the current challenge that we face is that cyber is not well understood by, there are two groups of people. One are a set of policymakers who operate without full understanding of the technical challenges. And the second are a group of technical experts who don't fully appreciate the policy challenges. I think one of the first challenges is for us to try to bridge this gap between the technical experts and the policymakers. So one of the challenges really are the norms of responsible state behavior. The United Nations group of governmental experts in 2015 agreed on a set of 11 norms of responsible state behavior. These were then subsequently sent to the General Assembly, where they were agreed upon by the General Assembly. So all states have actually voted on this. In my sense, this represents a basic set of behavior. They're not a high bar behavior where states can begin to operate, work towards building the capacity, building the capability, and the technical ability to adhere to these rules. I think if we can do this, then we will begin to agree that we can build a momentum where states can begin to build a momentum of a common understanding of responsible state behavior in cyberspace. The issue of international law is a fraught one. I think there are different interpretations on this. I think in the interest of time, I won't go into them. But I would say that the norms of responsible state behavior in 2015 GGE represent a basic set which states can begin to firstly understand them, build the capability and understanding and the technical ability to do. We have started to do this in ASEAN. As I said, the 10 nations that make up the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, a wide disparity of technical, economic development across ASEAN, have agreed in principle that we would adopt these norms of responsible state behavior. So now what we are doing is building on the issues of building the technical capability, operational understanding to implement this. My own sense is that there's a lot of basic work which can be done to build this up before we go into the issues that states disagree on. I think that if we focus on what can be done, build on this, there will be progress which will be useful and build momentum. Anything else?
Yes, hi. I have a question. So I'm a proud Singaporean as well, and I'm very curious about what you think Singapore's role can be in terms of shaping international agreements on cybersecurity cooperation. So for example, here in the US has collaborated with the EU on the Privacy Shield. The EU has also worked on the e-evidence proposal. I was curious if Singapore is working on anything similar.
Okay. I think we are mindful that, firstly, we are a tiny country, a small ant in a world full of elephants or even large mammals who may feel threatened by other elephants. Far be it from us to believe that we can help shape the international rules-based order, but we do see it is an essential part of our the national survival, that there is international rules-based order. So we are actively participating in this. We think that we bring several things to the table, which may or may not be applicable. Firstly is that we're a small country, so we bring a perspective of a small state. A lot of the players in these discussions tend to be large industrialized countries. Singapore is a small state. I think we still remember, we've only lately become more developed. We still are a member of the non-aligned movement and the group of 77. So we have a perspective of our region, of the developing states. We only just, we don't forget where we've come from, and we recognize the challenges that developing states face in terms of their technical and operational capability. So we bring that perspective. Secondly, I think we come from Asia. I think coming from Asia, we also perhaps have a different perspective from Western-dominated discussions, which we sometimes participate in. We speak English, but I think culturally, we are from Asia, and we still have that perspective. So some of these perspectives, I think, might be useful to illuminate a broader swath of opinion, which I think is necessary as we move towards trying to come, reach a broader agreement on issues that affect the whole world. Thank you. I think that's all I have time for. Thank you very much.